That was excellent. All I can hear is cats in the background.
Good. Is this going to be a problem? Okay, I'm leaving.
Hello and welcome to Scott Rock.
We're your hosts from Climb Scotland, Robert Mackenzie.
And me, Calum McBain, catch up with climbers every 2 weeks who have different epic tales to tell us.
We hope you enjoy the show.
And remember, when you're out climbing, be safe and do your buddy checks.
Cool, welcome back to Scott Rock. We are back on the controversial panel show, episode 20. We did promise originally that we were going to do one every 5 or 10 episodes, and so far we're still on track. So me and Calum are back, looking beautiful as always. We are joined by the wonderful Rebekah Drummond and the troll that lives under the bridge, Robbie Phillips.
Thank you.
Each of us, just like last time, each of us has a controversial topic that we would like to discuss. We are no doubt going to argue over a lot of these. Well, I hope we're going to argue over these, so they're not going to be very controversial. But like we said last time, we want you guys to argue with us. So leave your comments, send us an email, see what you think. Tell us what your thoughts are on all of these topics. Cool, right, so to kick off, Becca, Robbie, how are we? Welcome.
Thank you. We're really good. Well, I'm really good.
I'm tired. Still making my way through first coffee of the day. We got up not that long ago.
See, Calum and Becca, you've been dealing with the double trouble of the two kids for a while now.
Yeah.
You might have become accustomed to it. Robbie, the new daddy of two babies.
I know. I've got both of them down here with me. Hello. This is Kilda. And Sky is just chilling down by my hip. I'm not going to move her because she seems really relaxed.
Oh, nice. You went for like the island-themed names.
Yeah. I know. Well, it just felt right. We came up with Sky first, and then I was like thinking of somewhere else, another island that would be good. And then I thought I've always wanted to go to St Kilda. I've not yet made the trip, and so I sort of went for it. And yeah, she's kind of dark. St Kilda looks like it's dark rock. So, kind of fits, I think.
Do you call her Kilda or Saint
look at
Kilda?
him.
Or Saint for short?
I call her Saint Kilda. Saint Kilda! Come,
It's
Saint
definitely
Kilda!
an Edinburgh cat name.
We put an Instagram story up a couple of days ago asking for controversial questions for this, and there's a couple of good ones that I want to kick off with. Do you remember, back when we were teenagers, there was the internet sensational question, what colour was the dress? Was it blue or gold?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I remember that, yeah.
I need to
Right,
go
what colour was the dress? No, from memory, here we go.
Gold.
Gold.
I
See, I thought it was blue.
can't remember. Can't remember what I thought.
That question came in on the Instagram story, and it took me so long to figure out what it was. Next question. This is a big one, and this is going to probably lose us a lot of listeners, to be honest. Pineapple on pizza.
Yes,
Yeah.
Oh, no.
Yes.
absolutely.
You wouldn't put any other type of fruit in a pizza, so no.
But pineapple you put in curries and things like that. It's a savoury fruit.
Don't bring curries into this. We're talking about pizza.
I'm sorry, Calum. There is a tomato base on every pizza. Tomatoes are a fruit.
wait, you can make an exception for tomatoes. And everyone always thinks
So
they're a vegetable
what?
anyway, so...
That's what I was literally just Googling. Is tomato a fruit? It is a fruit.
Yes.
Therefore,
Well, they
you
grow in
have
trees,
fruit
don't they? So...
On a... What?
Is it not because they grow in trees instead of... Is that not what makes it a fruit, or...
I've got no idea.
Where do pineapples grow?
Trees?
Pineapples grow in trees? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What's your point?
What's your point?
Anything that grows in a
They're
tree
the
can go
same
on a
thing.
pizza.
Yeah.
Oh,
Nice.
bananas.
Acorn!
Right.
Acorn pizza!
Hey, banana and chocolate.
Sycamore
pizza's
pizza!
lovely. Right, I'm gonna kick off with my big controversial question, and I think I might pick on someone here, but my question is: when first ascents get done, the first ascensionist, the person that does the climb first, gets to name the climb, they get to grade the climb, but they also get to give a star rating for the climb. The star rating kind of gives an idea of the quality of the route. There's loads of factors that come into justifying the quality of that route, the exposure, the climbing, the gear, that kind of thing. But my question is, should the first ascensionist be the person that gives that star rating? Or should it be down to community consensus over time?
What happens if it's a route that no one climbs for a really long time? Especially in Scotland. You get loads of first ascents where no one will climb it again for like 6 or 7 years. And
yeah,
then
it encourage, like the star system, it does encourage traffic. Like if it's in a remote place that might not get climbed otherwise, but if it's a 3-star classic in a remote place, then it's more likely to get traffic.
Yeah, I think there's definitely an argument for the consensus over time. You know, once it's had more traffic and everyone can kind of give an opinion on it. But I think initially, when a route's first climbed, you're just kind of going to go with what the first ascensionist says.
But my question kind of boils down to: is the first ascensionist ever truly going to be able to be objective over that star grade? Because we all know, we've done first ascents before. Like, doing a first ascent means that little bit more to you than doing a climb that somebody else has done before. You've put the effort
3-star
in
experience
to
on a 0-star.
Like if you do a first ascent, it's been a 3-star experience. You know, you've put the effort into cleaning it, you've put the effort into scoping it out, you've put the effort into the adventure side of it. Then you get the excitement of being able to name it and grade it and putting it out there. So, you know, you're always going to think that the route is slightly better potentially in quality than what it actually is potentially. So can a first ascensionist truly be objective over that? I'm not sure. Whereas a community consensus over time is definitely going to be objective. And, you know, back in the day, we didn't used to have the ability for community consensus to come very quickly, but these days we've got UKC. We can do that relatively quickly if people go and climb that route, you know.
I reckon there's like proof that first ascensionists can grade their problems or routes or whatever correctly, because all you have to look at is find a first ascensionist who's given their own problems no stars. And there's loads of people equip sport routes. They don't give all their routes 3 stars, 2 stars, or even 1 star. But I think you're more likely to find a first ascensionist who has done a lot of new routes, who has a better understanding of what the star system is about. Someone who's done like one new route might think it's the best thing ever because they put all that effort into it. But someone who's like Neil Shepherd, Kev Howitt, I'm trying to think of other first ascensionists, Tess Fryer, Ian Taylor, like all these people have done like loads of first ascents, so it's more likely that they will grade things properly because they know what a 0-star route is, they know what a 3-star route is, and they'll know how their route fits into it.
And sometimes, like, if it's down to local consensus, those locals might actually not have the best idea of what makes a 3-star route or a no-star route, if that makes sense, because maybe in your local area all you have are no-star routes.
Tell me about it.
Yeah.
All my bridge classics are 4-star routes.
Right, okay, now Robbie's piped up, I'm gonna use you as my perfect example here, and this is what kind of got me thinking about this point. Obviously, the first ascensionists, they give the routes grades because they've got the experience to know kind of what that grade is, yeah. And by the same extent, they also have the experience to say roughly what the quality is, you know, what the star rating might generally be. And Robbie, you've done so many first ascents out there, you know more than most people what a star rating should be for a route, okay? But your classic first ascent last year, Pennywise the Dancing Climber, gets 3 stars in your book. And it is to be fair, to be 100% brutal here, it is a short extension to Monster's Edge that doesn't get any stars.
Zinger! Robbie's getting burned from the get-go in this.
So, you know, from an outsider that doesn't know Robbie, looking at that, going, how does that extra little bit get 3 stars when the main section of the route doesn't get any stars? You know,
it's not actually a very short extension.
Robbie's done.
How many meters are we talking?
I would say it's I mean, like, he said it's a short extension to an existing route, but the start part is literally a scramble, and then you do probably 3 moves to get into Pennywise, and then you do the best part of 10 meters of climbing, which is every single move is engaging, like hard in its own right. There's like, you get right to the very end and you pull the lip on a very exposed run out section and do like a crazy mantle. Yeah, and maybe I was overzealous with the stars because it was my own.
I'm not saying that. Look, I've got Robbie on the defensive here. This is great.
I'm open up that I'll make mistakes every now and again, for sure. But have you done it yet?
No, I've not done it. I did. I've not done it. I don't know whether it's worth 3 stars or not.
Murdo's done it, so we should talk to him about it.
Like I said, like Robbie's done plenty first ascent, so he kind of knows what's a 3-star route, what's not a 3-star route. So like that route probably gets 3 stars for sure. But for someone who doesn't know Robbie, looking at the guidebook, going how can that add? Like, was the first ascensionist just been a little bit too kind to their own route? Were they truly being objective over this? I don't know.
Is giving it more stars not kind of... It reminds me of like when people give things quite a hard grade, where it's almost like throwing the gauntlet down a little bit, and you're way more likely to get someone to come and try repeat it. Like, is it not James Pearson in The Walk of Life is the classic example where he graded it like
E12.
E10 or E11? E12, yeah. And Dave Mack went down and downgraded it to like E9 or something. But you get the same with stars. Yeah. If you get a 3-star route, it's way more likely people are going to be like, I'm gonna go try climb that. Whereas if you gave it 1 star, people might be like, nah, not worth it.
Yeah. Like if the first ascensionist didn't give star grades, then, you know, if there was no star grade, very few people would go and climb that route. I totally understand that. You know, if you gave it 3 stars, then loads of people are going to go and try that route. They might be disappointed in the route. It might only be worth 1 star, but you know they're going to go and try it. Okay,
I was just about to say that there'd just be a lot of forgotten about climbs in Scotland, like especially Scotland, where things are a bit more remote. That things would just get buried.
Well, they get buried anyway because it's Scotland.
Yeah,
but
unless they're 3 stars.
Sometimes, still when they're 3 stars,
I don't know. I think you still get covered in moss after a year of not being climbed. But actually, I've got a really interesting point to bring up on all this regarding like stars and their usefulness when you want to divert attention onto them. So a friend of mine was like the key developer, also the guidebook author for Calymnos, Aris. And you know, when I first went to Calymnos years ago, you know, every route was given like, all the routes were given like 5 stars. You know, like I can't remember what it was. It wasn't stars, but it was something, and it was like the highest you could possibly give. Every route was given it. They were all the classics were getting climbed all the time, and they were getting really worn out over the years. And then on my last trip to Calymnos, which is quite a while ago still, he told me in the latest update of the guidebook, he downgraded or downstarred a lot of the absolute classics, and in some of the crags which weren't getting any attention, he upgraded the stars with the idea that it would divert the crowds to these, you know, quieter crags, and essentially take some of the pressure off the more popular ones. The other thing he did was he downgraded and upgraded the routes depending on what he thought people would like, playing to people's psyches. So, for example, there's like a classic 8A there, which was like everybody's first 8A, and it was just there was always a queue on it, so he just downgraded to 7C plus. And then there was a 7C plus that was really good at another crag, but no one ever climbed it, so he upgraded to 8A, and all of a sudden it's the classic. So, you know, it's you can use the star grading systems to do things like that if you want, and if it's sport climbing, because it doesn't really matter too much. If it's trad climbing, it's maybe a little bit more ethically wrong.
It's kind of like it's like commercial grading or commercial starring.
Yeah. So what I hear Robbie saying is upgrade everything at Kirriemuir to 3 stars and all the sport routes on the Aberdeen coast to no stars, and then you'll have quiet crags for the rest of us.
But I feel like that kind of happens Anyway, like star systems, they are based, I feel like, around what's around locally, because yeah, you get 3-star things at places like Kerry and Myopics, and you're like, if you took that somewhere else, it's not going to be 3 stars, but it does encourage people to get on it. Otherwise, some crags would just have absolutely no stars, so just be like no starred routes anywhere. But it kind of tells you what's like the best of the bunch at that crag.
The star system's really odd though. I think a few years ago, or maybe more recently, there was a thread on UKC that talked about the star system, and people really rightly made the point that it's completely subjective. Like, you can get someone that'll do a 4-star route in the Scottish Mountains and have a crap day on it and say it was the worst route ever, and then you could have someone who does a 2-star route on a perfect day with the perfect partner, and they have a 4-star experience on that route. So is there really an objective set of qualities that makes a route 4 stars? Especially in Scotland, because you only get 4-star routes in Scotland. There's no 4-star routes in England. We've been total kind of like, we've been a bit funny and given ourselves an extra star in our guidebook system, which I think is really funny.
What about the Frankenmuir guidebooks that are all based on steins? Like a pint, like in a stein, like a beer stein.
Is that their system?
That's their system. I think they've got 5 of them, not just 4. They've got 5.
Is that how many beers that you get after you've done the climbs?
Yeah. So Action Direct has I think Action Direct has 7 actually. Yes. It's so funny that it's only got that number because it's Action Direct. I look at Action Direct, I'm just like, it doesn't look that good. People love it.
It's like, I guess the history contributes to its stars though, rather than climbing so much. Maybe Hubble's the same though. Is the climbing in Hubble that good, or is it just because it is a very historical route?
It doesn't look that good.
See, Robbie, you've just said Action Direct doesn't look good. Like, that's just cemented. Anytime you go back there, you're going to get chased away by the locals. That's it. You're no longer welcome.
This just cements what everybody else was saying about it being completely subjective. I think Action Direct looks rubbish. I think Hubble looks boring. Whereas when I go to Sierrana and look at La Rambla, I'm just like, holy crap, look at that 50-meter line. It looks amazing. Or, I don't know, any epic adventure route in Scotland, because I'm psyched on big long routes. I like, being pumped and having a long way between gear and not worrying that I'm going to hit the ground. That's kind of that adds a star for me.
Jumping around on monos minuses stars.
Yeah, risk of my tendon exploding out my forearm is -5 stars, I reckon.
So to round that up and end that question, I don't think there is an objective way to give stars. Even a community consensus or first ascensionist giving the stars, it's so subjective. So, the star rating gets traffic, it gives the route traffic. It might not be as good as you thought it was going to be at 3 stars, or it might be, in your book, a 4-star route. It's a totally subjective thing. Yes, the first ascensionist should be the one to give the initial star rating for sure. They have the experience to decide roughly what it is. It gives a route traffic. And then, things like UKC are great for being able to give the community consensus.
Except if you're Robbie and you're giving stars to routes at Duntelchig, according to Robert.
Yeah. Yeah, that's it. I've officially downgraded all of Robbie's first ascents to no stars.
I'll go next. I'll get it out of the way.
Oh, here we go.
Yeah,
now we're going to annoy some people.
Yeah, this is risky here. I could possibly make a lot of enemies with this question. No, this kind of point, I feel like it's a couple of questions actually. So actually, I was thinking I'm gonna rewind back in time, back to lockdown 1.0, because me and Calum had a conversation on Facebook that I remember. It was really funny. So basically, lockdown 1.0, I think it was spring or early summer. The sun was just baking everyone. It was beautiful, beautiful weather outside. Conditions, to be honest, conditions weren't great because it was kind of probably hot and sweaty. But they were the sort of days that you want to get out and go, climbing in the mountains, having, great days out, that sort of thing. And it was dry. And I got a message from Calum. And he was like, oh, hey man, what's up? Where you at, sort of thing. because everyone was in lockdown, so assuming I should be in my flat in Edinburgh, and I sit on this picture of me in Glen Etive with a Hawaiian shirt on, climbing the Etive slabs. I think it was long reach actually, and he just, I remember I was sort of watching to see what the response would be, and I think it was just something like like, oh, fair enough, dude, like, nice one, good to see you're getting out. And I was just sitting there giggling.
I missed the total giveaway was like, you sent that picture and then I didn't realise you also sent a message saying, oh, I was climbing with a bunch of like old vulnerable people and I've got a bit of a cough.
That's right, I forgot that bit as well. I mean, I'm a total wind-up because actually I was sitting in my flat underneath the fingerboard waiting, between the sets on some dead hangs, which is where I should have been, and it was right, but I was just wanting to see Calum's response. Because, like, the lockdown, obviously, back then, like, climbing was essentially illegal. Like, BMC, Mountaineering Scotland, had essentially put down the gauntlet and said, climbing is now illegal. If you go climbing, you will be shot on sight. I believe Robert actually had a sniper and he was like paroling the crags just in case.
Yeah, took down so many people.
Loads of people, yeah. Anyway, so now we can like fast forward to now, and we're not really in the same position we were then because climbing is not illegal, but COVID rates and numbers of death are through the roof. They are like monumentally far worse than they were back then. And then the question arises, is it acceptable risk to go climbing at this time when you are potentially putting emergency services and the NHS at risk or putting more strain on them? Is that something that we need to to consider now? I believe it is. But what is where's the line? Is going cragging, bouldering? Is bouldering fine? Is trad climbing fine? Is winter climbing out? Is that not allowed? Is going to the mountains okay? Like what is allowed? What isn't? So that's kind of like the first part of my question. I have like another part to the question later, which I'll kind of like get onto in a bit once we've chatted about this bit. So yeah, what do you guys think?
I think this is going to be the episode that Robbie loses all his sponsors, Calum and Robert get fired, and Rebekah has no repercussions whatsoever.
I don't think I'm going to lose my sponsors because my sponsors have already told me that it's totally legitimate that I do not go climbing. They're like, that's fine, you don't have to go climbing, do not worry about it, don't worry about posting any stuff on Instagram or Facebook or doing any of the stuff that we expect you to normally do. It's fine, because in a sense, my career as a professional climber, I guess, I'm almost like being furloughed, I'm being furloughed as a professional climber, so that's kind of cool. It's good that my sponsors have said that to me. What I'm at risk of is losing a bunch of friends who are probably currently out going climbing. But we'll see about that after this podcast goes live.
Surely it just comes down to everyone's individual like experience and not attitude to risk is the right word, but if you're an experienced boulderer, going bouldering locally right now is probably not the most dangerous thing you could do. But if you'd never gone winter climbing before, going out for your first winter routes might not be the best idea if you could do that locally. So maybe a really experienced winter climber will be able to make a justification that they can do easy routes and they'll be more safe than they usually would. But maybe they wouldn't go bouldering because they don't feel comfortable bouldering.
Yeah, because we were talking about this. Like, we've got winter climbing in Perthshire, and I was like, oh, I did want to get out in winter a bit this year. I've not done a lot, and I was like, oh, well, it would be cool. And I have kids. I'm not a risk taker. I wouldn't be taking any risks. It would be all green avalanche, and I'd be as safe as possible. But in another sense, I've not done enough winter climbing, I feel like, to be able to gauge risk, if that makes sense. Like, I'm not going to be able to make that judgment as accurately as someone who's done loads. Like, I might think some, like, placements feel, like, totally solid, totally bomber, but I'm not good at judging, like, snow or ice. So we made a call that we'll just give it a miss for now until things look a little bit better. That being said, I've been out bouldering, like, every week, and if sport climbing was legit at the moment as well, if it was a bit warmer, I'd be out sport climbing, I'd be out trad climbing, because I feel like I can make those judgments pretty bloody well.
I think that's fair enough. I think another point to consider as well, though, is, like, you know, when I see that on BBC News or something, they've found some walkers in, like, the hills, and they've been taken away by the police and fined, and as well as obviously been saved. They've been saved because they've got into some hellish problem. And quite often they're always referred to as climbers. You know, like, a couple of climbers were caught in the mountains. But they're not climbers. They're actually just kind of hill walkers. And so, like, I think, like, when you... It's quite difficult to, like, say, well, if you've got the experience, you can go and do it. And if you don't have the experience and you don't do it, but where's that line? And what counts as experience? And you know, I guess, like, some people might be like, well, I can handle myself in the mountains, of course, and they'll just go out and do it, but then they'll get in some sort of trouble. So yeah, it's quite a difficult one to nail down from an all-encompassing point of view, you know.
I feel I need to kind of clarify something here.
Yeah.
Mountaineering Scotland's position on the whole thing, Climb Scotland's position on the whole thing is, yes, if you can get outside climbing or out to the hills or whatever within your travel restrictions, that 5 miles outside of your local authority deal, if you can get out, you are more than welcome to get out. We encourage you to be able to go and do it. But because of, the increased risks to stressing on the NHS, on the emergency services, keep well within your limits, the limits of your ability, your experience, the weather, the conditions out there. Do stuff that is not going to put you under much stress, because it's great to get out there, but we don't want to cause any excess stress on emergency services, NHS kind of thing. Yes, it's like Becca said, going out doing winter climbing just now might be a little bit too risky because she's not practiced in the art these days, but bouldering she's all good with. So leave the winter climbing thing to the side for just a little bit, focus on bouldering. I think everybody has they know what their limits are, they know what the weather conditions are looking like, what their experience is, and they know what they can do that's well within that. Keeping things really easy. Like, I've been out to my local crag a couple of times, and I've not done anything hard, keeping it mega easy, just because it feels great to get out, and that's it. It's just brilliant being outside. I don't care about pushing grades or anything like that. Keeping it well within your ability. And for any of the people that have ended up having to be mountain rescued off hills because they've had accidents or got lost or whatever like that, not all of them have been taken away by the police, only the ones that were out with their 5 miles from their local authority. I don't want anybody being under the... Yeah, I don't want anybody to be under the assumption that if you go out into the hills within your local authority and hurt yourself, you're at risk of being arrested. That's not a thing. Only if you're flaunting the travel restrictions.
Yeah, totally. So yeah, that kind of, like, I think that quite nicely brings me on to the second part of the question, which is about the distance people will travel for climbing and who isn't allowed to do it. Because there was I'm going to try and phrase this in the nicest possible way. There was a period near the end of last year, in the end of 2020, when things were getting worse in the UK with COVID-19. They were getting steadily worse, and I was seeing it every day on the TV, on the news, and actually a friend of mine who's a paramedic in London and Sheffield was posting these insane stories on his Instagram every day of just how bad it was getting, and just really driving home that we should be kind of staying local as best as possible, trying to do everything we can to sort of like prevent the spread of the virus. And then basically at the same time, I saw a bunch of pro climbers, not one, just like a bunch of them, loads of them, who were posting on their social media platforms that they were traveling internationally, like to go climbing. And they were using the pro climber sort of like header as the reason for traveling, because in their eyes, climbing is essential work. I guess it's their job, it's their career. So they should be allowed to go and climb when the rest of the country can't climb because climbing's not their job. So yeah, that really kind of like, I will be honest, for about a week, I was like kind of stewing. I was like thinking about it, and I was like, can I get a wee bit upset with them? There was quite a number of them who were like literally going from one country to the next, to the next, to the next, and it was dead obvious. And I was like, somebody has to say something. And then Jorg Verhoeven, who's a really outspoken, but you know, in a really good way, climber. He's a professional climber from Holland, but he lives in Innsbruck, and he was basically wrote a post about it, basically saying, not calling anyone out, but basically saying, you know, should pro climbers be traveling? And then that kind of gave me the courage to do the same thing, and I posted it. And off the back of my post, I had hundreds and hundreds of messages, basically from people saying, yeah, you're totally right. Pro climbers shouldn't be traveling right now. They should be staying local to their spaces, local to their homes, and trying to you know, stick to roses like everybody else. And I think the other thing that kind of like irked me a little bit with a lot of the pro climbers, that in particular the pro climbers that I saw traveling, was the fact that they might be on they were on national teams, and they live in areas with the world's best climbing. Like, you know, like they have like world-class climbing on their doorstep. They do not have to travel to another country to get climbing. They also had the keys to all the local gyms, which no normal climber is allowed to go into at the moment in any of these countries. So they were just like, they had the keys to the gyms that they can just go and use whenever they wanted. I'm just like, they have more than the rest of us. So why is it that they have to travel for climbing? Why is it acceptable? Because I don't think that climbing rocks is an important enough activity that it should be deemed essential work. And that pretty much rounds up my. I guess you can tell what my opinion is on it. My tone. But yeah, what do you guys think?
Yeah, it's interesting. Like there's a couple of sponsored athletes out there that is the way they make their money, and without being able to go climbing, would they get their same amount of money from their sponsors? Or because I don't think the sponsored athletes are going to get put on any kind of furlough for that kind of thing.
Well, I did essentially. Like, I mean, I have been I've got three main sponsors who together make up like a bulk of my annual income, and two of them have essentially furloughed me, so I get it's less money than I would per year. And I was just like, that's acceptable, you know? I understand, you know? That's absolutely fine. Because everyone else has to deal with that. Also, because I'm not traveling, my expenses have gone right down. So it's kind of okay, you know? It's not a big deal.
Surely sponsors wouldn't be encouraging folk to kind of like push the guidelines, because in my opinion, that is totally pushing the guidelines. If you're supposed to be the professional athlete thing is to travel out with your local authority area to access training facilities. I think that's what the deal is. And if you've got, and that should be the closest one that is local to you, not in the next country. Like in the next, like if you've got a good wall or like a good crag in your next like local, in the next local authority area over for you, so surely sponsors wouldn't be promoting a blatant like
disregard for
piss take of the guidelines, like, because it makes their brand look bad.
Yeah.
I think the guidelines have obviously been written like for more mainstream sports where it would work if you're like a track cyclist and you didn't live in a authority where there's like a velodrome, but the next authority along had a velodrome you could train in. So it's like allowing you to go to that specialised facility. I think like going on a climbing trip and kind of trying to relate that in the same way that a velodrome and a professional cyclist used, like in that same way, is a bit kind of like far-fetched. Maybe going to a climbing wall is the same as that, but not going abroad to train in Margalef or Catalonia or somewhere in Spain.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that.
Again, I'm going to clarify something here again. The exemption for professional athletes to travel allows professional athletes to travel out with their 5 mile from their local authority restriction to travel across local authorities as far as they need to for training. But that only extends to professional athletes that have, and the term professional athlete only extends to those on a GB squad, not those who get paid to climb. So if you are on a GB squad, in any sport, you get that exemption. If you are not on a GB squad, you don't get the exemption to travel as far as you like. Even if your main income is being a professional climber like Robbie Phillips, you don't have the exemption to travel. So loads of sponsored athletes out there travelling to go to the crag and do social media posts and all that stuff. Within the UK, you don't have that exemption.
It's even more specific, actually, because it's not even... You have to be in a GB squad or a GB team, but it has to be connected to the Olympic pathway as well. So, like, it has to be a squad that is competing in the Olympics, or aiming to compete in the Olympics. Like, that is the only thing that counts as professional. So I think it excludes some of the winter Olympic sports.
It excludes our GB ice climbing team, and it excludes the GB paraclimbing team, because they're not on the Olympic pathway at the moment.
Yeah,
because they're the IFSC comps rather than the Olympic.
Yeah.
And even then, like whoever's travelling further than needs be is just kind of flaunting it to the rest of us that can't do the same, which is going to make folk feel quite bitter. Yeah. But in the same sense, would you rather, if they were going to bend the guidelines or break them, would you rather they just kept quiet about it?
Yeah.
And did it?
Yeah, I would. And
then just lied, like being like, "Oh, everyone should be staying at home and doing what they're told," and then like sneaking off and like winter climbing on the bed.
I don't think they should be doing that. But I'd rather they did that than what they're doing, which is basically just highlighting the fact that they're breaking the rules. Because my absolute last point for this was the perception it gives off. It's rules for some and rules for others. It does feel a bit unfair, but then this really is unfair because, if you're just like saying, I don't care about the rest of you guys, I'm just going to off and climb, and then it creates a bad perception, it's a bad role model in my opinion. Something I'm having to think about as well on a personal level is last year I had an expedition trip to Pakistan planned. I had to bail on that obviously, and in this summer I was like, right, well, I'll hope that I can maybe go to Pakistan again, but at the moment, even if things were absolutely even if travel was kind of more or less okay come the summer, international travel, I'm still thinking about the perception it would give off going at a time, like this, when we're just off the back of such an extreme, pandemic and situation, COVID and everything. That I'm still wary of it. I'm like, maybe I shouldn't go because it's encouraging more people to travel when actually what we should be doing is just kind of enjoying what we've got in our own country and local to us, which, to be honest, is pretty good. Well, I guess in my situation, I was actually more considering the fact that things might be okay in the UK, but they might not be okay in Pakistan, even though international travel is allowed. And my really strong opinion is that there's people in those countries that won't have access to the first world medical care that we have, and we're essentially just adding to the problem. So until everything's kind of internationally is a little bit more solid, I would be reluctant. Whereas I think what people are kind of doing more. And well, I think what people are kind of doing, especially, I see a lot of expeditions kind of being planned from the States. Things until recently have been a lot more relaxed there, and they're just kind of like organizing expeditions left, right, and center to all over the place. I know teams going to Brazil, Pakistan, the Himalayas, and I'm just like, how can you possibly be organizing this right now? How can you be so sure that it's gonna be okay? I don't understand. Like, I'm sitting here being like I don't think I'm going to be able to go to Pakistan, and you guys are all going, yeah, we're going to Pakistan.
But is that the same, like, in less developed countries? Like, do you think about it the same when there's civil unrest, when there's other outbreaks of different illnesses that might not affect you so much? Like, there's always going to be a lack of, medicine and medical equipment. And I'm just wondering if this same mindset will continue on, if that makes sense. Like, we should be taking this into consideration all of the time, not just in...
Yeah, I do think we probably should. I think, if anything, this has probably allowed us a chance to think more about our actions.
Yeah.
With future travel, I guess, like, should climbers be climbing / traveling during COVID? Yeah, that's a general question, isn't it?
So I think, like, for me, like, yes, please still, like, go if you're able to within the travel restrictions. Please still go climbing, go hill walking, but stay well within your limits. Take it easy. Don't be pushing yourselves. Don't be pushing your experience or the conditions. Winter weather is all forever changing at the moment. So take it easy. And for those that are using the pro athlete exemption of being able to move around, I suppose think about what you're doing and the message you're putting out there. Think about what you're doing and the message that you're putting out there on social media and stuff like that. But realize that the pro athlete exemption really is very limited to who it benefits.
Yeah.
Just because you're a sponsored athlete doesn't cover you. So yeah, do really think about what you're putting out there and what you're doing.
Should we celebrate the bold? Go.
Do you want to get more info?
Yeah, explain. Bold as in bold ascents.
Bold, dangerous wise.
Yeah.
Like bold routes and soloing, essentially.
Yes.
I mean,
yes, I think we absolutely should.
Yeah, sure.
But so would you take partial responsibility when someone hurts themselves?
Just to preface this, though, I reckon, like, it's so easy to narrow it down and say, oh, it's just soloing and bold routes that are dangerous.
But
scrambling's dangerous. If you fall off scrambling, you die. It's like soloing.
Yeah,
totally.
Like, the risk is exactly the same. Like, someone who's more an experienced trad climber is arguably at less risk in a bold route than a novice scrambler. Like, risk exists in all aspects of sport, and you have to accept that. So it's not just soloing and dangerous trad routes. Like, it's everything that's included.
Is your argument that celebrating bold ascents is encouraging people to do slightly more dangerous stuff than they might be able to do, and then might hurt themselves or die? So effectively we're encouraging people to commit suicide,
or encouraging reckless behaviour, essentially.
No, well, I mean, like, is free solo climbing reckless behaviour? That's the question, because
but so I'm not.
I was gonna say, like, for example, Alex Honnold, right, soloing El Cap. It was obviously, like, Alex is not someone who's very reckless, and he's the complete opposite of reckless, and he made sure that he was as in control as he possibly could be from when he did the ascent. And I think, like, there was concern when free solo came out that it was going to encourage loads of people to go out and do that, to go and try and free solo El Cap, but I don't see litters of bodies at the bottom of Freerider from people trying to free solo El Cap. Yeah. That's not happened. But
I think that film
all that
did
means,
quite
though,
a good job of highlighting how calculated Alex Honnold was, if that makes sense. And I'm not trying to argue that people shouldn't solo or shouldn't do bold routes, because I can't question anyone's motives. But when we start to glorify people doing bold things, it starts becoming the perception, that you get, fame and glory from doing bold things, and we are encouraging more people to do this through that.
Okay, what's the alternative to, if you don't glorify it, do you ignore it?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
I'd say, because ignoring it's worse.
I actually think if you look historically, we're probably, at this point in time, we probably glorify that type of climbing far, far less than we did 30 years ago. Because, back in the days when bold climbing was the thing, and you had like, Johnny Dawes and John Redhead clashing, and then you also had like in America like Ron Kalk and flipping, what's his name? Forgotten the guy's name. Anyway, like they were, and those guys, they were just like one-ing up each other for who can do the boldest, scariest thing. And now it's not about that. It's about who can dead hang off the Beastmaker small edge for the longest with the most amount of weight in the other hand. Because really, that is what everyone should be trying to achieve in their climbing.
But we do still have it. Like, we have speed records on things, and by which, like, the only way you can get faster is by taking more and more and more risks, essentially. And when we celebrate someone having done something faster, are we then encouraging more people to take those risks?
But so Robbie's point's really interesting about like the Masters of Stone era, like kind of hard testosterone fueled soloing and this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
But take it back to like the 50s and 60s, like if you fell off on anything, you died. So celebrating any climbing at all back then is celebrating being bold, because when people went climbing 50 years ago, any climbing was bold, like no matter what you did.
Yeah, but then did it need to be if people are doing things for the right reasons, did it need to be celebrated? Does it need to be mentioned? Like, or does it just encourage reckless behaviour?
I mean, there's always going to be a bit of celebration amongst the climbing community. I mean, people are psyched on what other people are doing, so they're going to talk about it.
The doing it for the right reasons argument is like, well, if we look at the Stone Masters, even before the Stone Masters, like Royal Robbins and bloody hell, what's his name, Warren Harding, like the two of them were doing it for the right reasons, but they were seriously competitive with each other because of the popularity the other one was getting over doing their ascents. So they were pushing the limits and pushing the boldness of stuff because of the popularity, but they were also doing it for their own personal, like, I want to go and do awesome climbs and I want to climb for my life. But like, I don't know, like my kind of perspective on it is, yes, celebrating boldness and bold ascents, and whether it be bold trad lines, scary sketchy sport lines, bouldering or free soloing, like there might be the odd person that gets enthusiastic and goes out and tries to do something like that, but they then are doing it for themselves for whatever reason they want to, but they have to accept the risks that come along with that. If we don't celebrate, the bold ascents, the big things that happen in our sport, how is the sport supposed to develop? All like we said, back in the heyday, back in the 70s and 80s, when the sport was developing really fast, was because the guys were going out and doing really bold stuff, pushing the limits of their physical ability and pushing the limits of the equipment that they had. If we no longer do bold ascents, if we no longer push the limits of our ability and the equipment that we have, if we no longer do bold stuff, the sport stops developing.
Oh no, we move on to the Beastmaker Olympics.
Yeah, Beastmaker Olympics, that's it.
But I still feel like there's this kind of attitude towards taking risks that when you're like, oh yeah, and then I did this route and like these 3 bits of gear ripped and I took this like huge big fall and landed like next to my belayer, and
like all my videos.
Like, oh wow, yeah. You're like, because right, here we go. Like when you were in Kochimo or whatever, you're like, oh yeah, look at this bit of gear that I just clipped. It's so rubbish. Blah blah blah, and it's like, but is that cool? Or is it just a little bit risky?
But to defend Robbie, to be fair,
I don't really remember much about that, to be honest. I'm just like vaguely remember seeing some like chossy shit that you were clipping.
That's just like part of climbing. Like you can't ignore that there's bad gear and like there's sketchy stuff. Like,
yeah, definitely not. But you can also not glorify it.
I'm not
But then
glorifying
if you glorify it, you ignore it.
I don't think I was. Sorry, I'm going to defend myself a little bit here. I don't think I would have been glorifying it in the way of like, look how brave I am. I think it was more like, look at this and how crazy this is, kind of thing. You know, like that you have to kind of like figure this stuff out. Like when I'm in the Dolomites, I remember taking pictures of all the rusty pegs that you have to trust, and it's just like it's kind of scary, and it's like, Jesus, this is climbing. You know, this is what you have to do sometimes, and I don't know. It's just kind of like giving a window of a view into like what you have to do sometimes in climbing, which is kind of I think it's kind of interesting.
Yeah, but, like a bit of an insight. But I guess there's ways to word that. Like I watch the Weekend Whipper videos, and instead of being like, oh look at that fall, I'm like, oh, look at that fall.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
That's like, why is that unless they're not posting this as a learning point, they're posting this for people to be like, oh man, look at that. And you're just like, that's not entirely responsible, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, I would probably agree with that. Yeah. Well, I wonder how many people on Friday night say to their mates, let's try and get the Weekend Whipper, you know? I wonder how many people do that. Like I'm going to...
No, but you'll see folk big up their risk-taking a lot.
So, I think, have you been on Weekend Whipper, Robbie?
Yeah, I even know how many times I've been on it.
Yeah, I've been on once, so that's two of the four of the panel have been on it, and like I think of the time that I was on it not as like a glorification of risk, but like I think you can learn from the Weekend Whipper. I don't think people go out and really like want to get on Weekend Whipper, but I think to defend it a little bit, it can be used as a method of learning what not to do. Like my video is like
out there like that. It's not like, oh, so these are the mistakes that this guy made, and here's how not to do them.
But I think quite often they do. Like in the description, it'll say like things that went wrong, and if you look at the comments, people will comment and be like,
yeah.
Oh yeah, definitely. The comments were very particular about what I did wrong when I fell off.
Yeah,
how I fell, you know, why I shouldn't have fallen that way, like why I should have chosen to spin around in a different direction when I was falling.
But then, to
obscene.
continue this slight dig at Robbie, do you not have a YouTube video that like either the headline or the tagline is someone falling off in the sea cliffs? So I mean,
you're right, and I guess does it kind of glorify the falling? I guess it's. I mean, those taglines, was like 50-foot whipper. They're mainly just to like get people to watch.
Yeah, that's not a defense, Robbie.
It's not mainly. It is to get people to watch, because we've narrowed in on what people like to see, and danger is one of the things they like to see. But I mean, I don't go out looking for danger. I don't go out trying to hurt myself.
But if it does happen, is it okay to talk about it?
I think it's okay to talk about it.
Yeah, for sure. It's okay to talk about it, but it's not okay to make it look like cool.
But then Robbie doing the pictures of the pegs, like to me, all that is to me is someone.
Oh yeah, that's different.
Okay.
But I had it in my head that it was kind of like look at these things that we're clipping. We're so badass.
Your view of me is so low. It's all coming out now.
Yeah.
Should we celebrate bold ascents? I still say yes. Like when someone does something awesome that pushes the boundaries of the sport, regardless of how bold it was, yes, we should celebrate it because of the development aspect. You know, if someone does super risky, I think absolutely yes, we should talk about it and let people learn the lessons from that risky element that they did, whatever that may be. Encouraging people to continue doing risky things, you know, that has to be a personal decision. I think every climber knows fine well that it's a risky sport that we do. Like, no matter what we do to try and make it as safe as possible, there are still risks there, and the bolder you get, the more risks you're bringing in. I think you just have to, as a climber, accept what risks they are and what you're actually willing to put yourself through, I suppose. You know, that has to be a personal choice. That can't come from pressure from the community or social media videos or, no matter how many views you might get, Robbie, stop falling off.
No, honestly, this has actually been a really good conversation because it's actually made this particular topic has made me think about like how I put forward things like that. So thanks for that, Becca, because I might actually do something like a video on that or something just to say.
I don't think there's not like a concrete answer to that one, is there? I think it's like you can celebrate bold climbing, but I don't think you should focus on it and exclude every other part of climbing. It should be celebrated equally along with every other aspect of climbing.
Personally, I don't think it should be glorified. When we glorify something, we encourage it, and I don't think we should be encouraging people to take big risks.
But when you say glorify, but like what do you? I still don't understand what you mean by glorify. Does that mean we like? So James Pearson does that new that direct finish of Charlie Woodburn's the other day there on the grit in Black Rocks. Very, very, very bold ascent. E9. You're gonna fall off. You're gonna smash yourself on the bottom of the crag. So does that he didn't do that according to you? According to the media, we're just not going to post that.
Yeah, well, why does it need to be in the media? Yeah, because definitely. Like, tell your friends or whatever. Yeah,
I actually think that's an incredible mental achievement. Like pushing the boundaries of like what your mind can deal with. Any relatively bold. I mean, all of Dave McLeod's ascents are relatively bold, but any Dave McLeod hard routes, like, or if I ever do this thing up at Duntelchig, I mean that's got risk to it as well. Like those things don't exist. They didn't happen, so it doesn't allow the sport to really progress in that way because less people are gonna kind of know about it. But it doesn't. I think.
Okay, so maybe you need to be careful about the wording around.
Yeah, the wording and possibly also the style in which someone does something. So, like Alex Honnold and Dave McLeod, I think, are great examples of people who are just very careful in the way they approach things. They're very calculated, and of course, accidents do happen, but they approach it in a very intelligent and thoughtful way. Whereas you get the guy from the Masters of Stone videos from years ago. But there was this other guy who actually died on an Irish sea cliff, and he was just mad. He just like soloed things and said, "Hold breaking doesn't happen to me, and I'll solo at my limit, and I'll always push. I'm always pushing. It was just the attitude that came across was wrong. He ended up dying on an Irish sea cliff when a wave took him out because I think he just didn't calculate how big the waves were going to be, and you're just kind of waiting for that to happen. He's going to die eventually because his approach to free solo climbing or to climbing in general is just quite dangerous. So maybe we just shouldn't promote that type of attitude or approach.
Yeah. Making light of risk.
Yeah.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, like, we're all, somebody's friend and somebody's, like, But instead, filmmakers, instead of saying, like, look, guys, that is fucking reckless. That's, like, you're our friends. Can you please, like, rein it in? They're like, you know what? We're going to film it. And we're going to make a movie about it.
A kind of deeper question I have about this is it the audience or is it the filmmaker that's glorifying this?
Yeah.
Because to play devil's advocate a bit, like, I think the role of a filmmaker is to portray something that is happening in real life. Like, as a filmmaker, you can either choose to completely ignore it and not film anything, or you choose to create something. And really, for me, it's like the audience that is the audience is the person that glorifies it, not the filmmaker.
But the filmmaker can choose to step in, like they're people.
Yeah, but then is it? Do you just never show anything that's sketchy? That unfortunately, there is sketchy people. There is people that are going to die. That's just like the way of life. Do you either choose to completely ignore them and not film them, or...
You definitely have a control over how it's portrayed, though. And if you did think it was, you are in a position to step in and say something and give your opinion.
But what if they just say, "I don't care. I'm going to do it anyway."
Yeah, well, you're in control of how this film comes.
It just strikes me as a funny line between, like...
Yeah, definitely.
It's almost like censorship. It's like, do you just pretend things don't happen? And I don't like the idea of censorship and just basically thinking things don't happen when they do.
Yeah, acceptable risk is different for everybody, and it has to be no matter what kind of bold climbing you're doing, whether it's a bold trad line or free solo or whatever, like it has to be a personal choice, and you need to understand the risks involved with that. I agree, like when it comes to the glorifying it or putting content out there, videos, social media posts, whatever it is, like videographers and people, even sponsored athletes putting stuff out there, they kind of have a responsibility to put what is happening out there. But the wording of things can definitely be better, instead of just saying, this guy free soloed something. You can go, this guy free soloed something, but free soloing is really freaking dangerous. So if you're going to do it, understand the risks.
I agree that we do need to recognise bold ascents, because they're impressive feats, aren't they? Like, otherwise, it, helps push sport forward. But I don't think, like making risk the big deal is how we do that.
Okay.
It's kind of similar to mine, isn't it?
It's quite similar to Becca's, to be honest, or like a similar theme. But there's two things that made me think of this. One of them was one of the first podcasts I listened to called Dirtbag Diaries. I don't know if you guys have ever listened to it much before.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
But basically it was a guy going through a story and saying that his friend had been on a trad route and he'd been like at the bottom giving him loads and loads of encouragement, like, oh, go on man, you can do it, you've got this, you're strong, keep on going. And basically what ended up happening is the guy took a fall, all his gear ripped out, and he hit his head really badly and ended up with like a kind of mild to serious like brain injury that's like affected him for the rest of his life. And the belayer, the guy who did the podcast, basically said that, like, that haunted him for almost the rest of his life. Like he kind of felt like he was a part of what had happened by giving him encouragement, and that maybe if he hadn't done that, that it might not have happened. And then the other thing that made me think about this is there's two distinct times I've been climbing, once with Robbie and once with Robert, and one of them with Robbie was in Wales, and we were climbing King Wad, and I remember getting like 2/3 of the way up, and like the gear wasn't bad, it wasn't like amazing. Realistically, I think it would have held a fall, and I was a bit scared of pulling in some of the holds because I thought they were a bit loose. And Robbie will tell you, like, I must have been there for like an hour or something, like at one spot, like waiting to go, and like eventually I committed to it. And the one thing that like really pushed me forward is I heard Robbie shout up from below, like, just grab that crimp and pull as hard as you possibly can. And then that's all I heard. And I remember grabbing that crimp and full crimping it and just absolutely yarding on it and doing the move and like getting up. And like, to be honest, like, if Robbie hadn't said that, I actually think I wouldn't have done it. I think I would have climbed back down and taken the gear out, or lowered off or fallen off or something. And then another time was Robert, very similar at Dunkeld. I put loads of gear in and was going up and down, and eventually Robert just said, either the gear's alright or the gear's not alright. And then I thought about that and was like, oh, the gear's alright. And I did the move, and it was fine. And like, two examples for me where like, I think without the belayer saying something, I don't know if I would have ended up doing what I had done. So my question is, maybe specifically to trad climbing, is it okay to give encouragement, or should you just be like completely silent and let people make their own decisions, given the risk is quite high?
I stand by the statement that I gave to you. Either the gear is alright or the gear is not alright. Like, the guy that you mentioned doing the Dirtbag Diaries, your man fell off and all of his gear ripped. The gear wasn't alright. So, like, regardless of whether he pushed on or tried to lower off or whatever, the gear was probably going to rip regardless. So I don't think that was really on him, I suppose. Giving someone encouragement, that's a specific thing. Either people like getting encouragement when they're climbing, or they don't like getting encouragement when they're climbing. I like getting encouragement when I'm climbing. I like people shouting and screaming for me, whether it's indoors or sport climbing or trad climbing, doesn't matter. I like that kind of social sort of pressure side of it. But there are some people out there that really don't like it. That's a conversation you need to have with your climbing partner. Is like, do you want me to talk to you? Do you want me to encourage you? Or do you want me to shut up?
I think also it depends on the situation. So, like King Wad, in particular, I can remember there was a gear on the left. There was a pin on the right, like a peg, hammered in peg. That was pretty bomber. And actually, there was those two collections of gear, and if you were going to take a big fall, but the fall you were going to come nowhere near the ground, and I think like when you're on the lead, sometimes you think the fall's bigger than it actually is, whereas when you're belaying, you can get more of an idea of the scale, and you're like, actually, you know, I can hold this fall, he'll be fine, yeah. So I guess I was encouraging you from that perspective. I was trying to give you like motivation to push on, because I knew that there was a good chance like the gear wasn't going to go anywhere, you weren't going to go anywhere. On the other hand, I have been in a situation, I've been in situations as well, but more recently with Cullen actually, where I was worried for his ability to do something, having just been on it, and I was nervous because I knew the gear wasn't good. So before he went up the climb, I would be like, I'd say, I without not wanting to put him off, I'd be like, right, this move here is hard. I found it hard. I was like, just so you're aware of that, like, you know, it's almost like the opposite of encouragement. It's actually like it could work against them in some ways, but I just want to be aware. And so like in situations like that where I know it's bold or when I know it's hard and I know there's a risk, I'll generally shut up and I'll just like be very focused, you know, because I don't want to encourage them, you know, too much either.
I think maybe experience level comes into it a little bit as well. Like if you're less experienced than your belayer, or you think that your belayer is better than you're maybe slightly more likely to listen to what they're saying. So maybe, yeah, if you are the more experienced party, you've got to be a little bit careful if you're like, oh, go for it, because they might think, oh, if they say I can go for it, they know what they're doing, I'm fine. Whereas if you're not quite used to judging gear or thinking about it, then it might not be okay. But if it's the other way around and you're the experienced climber and you've got like not quite as an experienced belayer and they're like, oh yeah, go for it, you're more in a position to be like, actually, nah, I'm not very comfortable for going for it right now, or I know my gear's bad and I know I'm going to need to be really careful. And I think you're more in a position to be able to make that call and ignore what your belayer is saying. Because I remember, belaying a friend at Dunkeld on this climb she was on, and she was like up, down, she was up, down, she put in a bit of gear, and she's like up, down, and I remember just thinking, I'm not saying anything, because I don't know what her gear's like. She's in more of a position to say that, and I'm worried if I say go for it, she's going to be like, okay, cool, Becca knows my gear's okay and I'll go for it, but I don't know. I know there is a good nut placement there, but I don't know if she's put it in properly. I don't know, but if she starts climbing, I'll be like, okay, nice one, you're doing really well. Like, there's that kind of like calming encouragement without like kind of like going like, oh, go for it, go for it, go for it.
Maybe it's just ultimately that comes down to the climber. I'd probably clarify that, particularly with the example I used of Robbie, I think I needed that encouragement. And I think it came from, like, generally, like, my gear is good. And Robbie had climbed enough with me to know that, even though he couldn't see the gear. And generally, I'm probably overcautious with gear. So, like, a bit of encouragement in the other way kind of helps. So if I was in the same situation you were just talking about, like, that encouragement might have helped. But, yeah, with two different climbers.
You're an experienced climber as well. We know that, I know that you wouldn't go for it above, you wouldn't make what you thought moves you might fall off of above gear that wouldn't hold you from the ground.
Yeah,
it's knowing your partner, knowing your partner's ability and their experience as well. These are really important conversations to have with your climbing partners. You know, like understanding what their experience, their ability is. You know, understanding what encouragement they actually want.
Yeah, because even on sport climbs, sometimes just like don't like being encouraged.
Yeah,
but it depends day to day as well. Like, I remember when we were in Calumnos once, when we'd not long started seeing each other, and I was like, oh, Calum, take. And you were like, no, just go for it. And I was like, no, fucking take. Like, you probably not gauged it quite right there.
Yeah.
Whereas at other points, I do need a bit of a push. And I've, like, in comps when I was younger, I remember hearing Like, sometimes you, like, everything zones out, but I remember, like, hearing Geek's voice coming through being like, be aggressive, Becca! And I was, like, quite used to being quite hesitant. I was like, oh yeah, go for it. Actually, like, be aggressive in your climbing, and some things like that kind of stuff really cuts through and does help, but...
It is good just to, I suppose, understand that it's not... Like, encouragement isn't like this neutral thing that you just always do. And I think if you either climb at comps or you only climb indoors, maybe you could easily go outside thinking that. Mm-hmm. It's good to understand there's like a bit more depth to it than what first kind of meets the eye.
Yeah. I think a bit of understanding from the B layer as well, potentially, that, you know, you don't actually know what that gear's like, you know. You might know fine well what the moves are like and whether that person's capable of climbing the moves, but you don't know if they've actually placed that bit of gear correctly or not. So, should you really encourage them to push it when they're obviously not comfortable?
But I guess at the end of the day, it is. I feel like this is like slightly contradicting the last question. I think it is personal responsibility to whether you go for things or not.
100%.
And you've got to make that call. Like, you can easily, like, you can't blame someone else's encouragement on your own decisions. Like, again, I remember, like, at Crags, someone wigging, again, this was just sport climbing, but I can imagine the same happening on track, like someone wigging out above a bolt and being like, it's too noisy in here, there's too much noise, like, can everyone at the crag just kind of, like, shut up? And you're like, okay, you're having a bad day, but it's not everyone else's chatter at the bottom of the crag that's causing this, like, stressful situation. Like, you have to take a little bit of onus, or, like, all the onus here. And I think the same can extend to...
But could you blame a filmmaker that's glorifying...
I remember being in Spain, and, like, in Oleana, trying to red point this 8C, and Phil Jack's daughter, Isla, who was just a wee thing at the time, was screaming at the bottom of the crag, like, just crying. She wanted her dad, and her dad was bullying me, and she was screaming, and I was like in the midst of the crux trying to block out the screaming. I was like, I can't do this. Like, Bill, tell her to shut up. I couldn't handle it. I couldn't handle the scream. I was like, okay, just take.
In reality, were you maybe gonna fall off anyway?
Maybe.
Were you maybe a bit pumped?
Probably.
Was it really?
Yeah, I was using Isla as an excuse.
This is great. This whole podcast has just been bash Robbie. So should we encourage people when they're climbing?
I think you need to talk to your climbing partner about it.
Have a good conversation.
For sure. It's a subjective thing. Have the conversation with your climber. Know when is appropriate, when's not.
Yeah. Maybe Venga Ale is not appropriate whilst free soloing. And a quiet, come on dude, you've got this, or, you know, is okay, you know, through boulder territory.
Your bum's looking great right now.
You can make the right choice.
Yeah.
I am holding onto the rope. Yeah, this has been good fun, man. Really good fun.
Yeah, another controversial panel show done. Excellent. Thank you very much for that, guys. That was awesome.
Yeah, cheers.
Yeah.
When are we doing it again? Another 6 months.
Oh, well, like, I think me and Calum are definitely going to have to try and find different people for the next panel show. We can only handle so much Robbie Phillips.
Aww.
Yeah, maybe I'd rather be swallowed whole by a horse-sized duck than trampled to death by 100 duck-sized horses. Maybe I'd take the duck.